Hello and welcome to episode 8 of Indie Comic Ninja. This month we're talking to Joshua Howell, author of the comic book The Fierce Are Fading. That's right. Just the other day I had a good talk with Joshua D. Howell. We talked a lot about his comic book, and he actually gave some very good insight on his writing process and just some really good suggestions for anybody who's trying to get started with writing. A lot of wisdom coming out and just knowledge on how to get started and just to kind of push forward and, in his case, work through some really major struggles with getting published, and then, just kind of for him pushing through and self-publishing to get his book out there, finding success with that, and really finding maybe some major motivation with getting something out there. So you can find more about Joshua D. Howell at joshuadhowell.com. There are links there to pretty much everything to do with what he's writing. You can find a link to his Twitter and Instagram. You can also go to Facebook at facebook.com/thefiercearefading, all one word. So you can either just go there or go to Facebook and search for The Fierce Are Fading. Find out more about that comic, more about the things that he's writing, and it sounds like he has a lot kind of going on in the future for stories. So he's somebody to kind of keep your eye out for, I think. So yeah. Also like to remind you, you can find out all the show notes at indiecomic.ninja/episode 8 and find us online, indiecomic.ninja. Get us on Twitter at IndieComicNinja, Facebook, same thing. Pretty much go somewhere, look for Indie Comic Ninja. If it's there, it's probably us. Thank you again for listening. If you have the chance, go over to iTunes or wherever you download and listen to this podcast. Leave a good review. If you have something bad to say, I guess you could leave that review. But like I always say, just shoot me an email, info@indiecomic.ninja. Let me know the things I can do to fix this. But yeah, hope you enjoy this conversation. And thanks. I thought it was funny too when I talked to you at MiniCon. Like, I remembered seeing you last year at MidwestCon, but I don't know why it just didn't click into place.
Oh, it didn't click with me either. Yeah. I think our conversation made me think of I talked to a guy last year, and then I went and looked you up. So that's funny.
I'm glad. That's funny. So anyway, yeah, I met you, I guess, last November at Midwest Comic Con, and you were pitching your book, The Fierce Are Fading.
Yeah. At that time, we were. I think we were like a week away. No, we were 2 weeks into our Kickstarter for the graphic novel.
That's what
and
I
was I was passing out little pamphlets, trying to get people to go pledge for it and whatnot. Yeah.
Right. I remembered picking that up and getting really excited just based on like talking to you, and like I remembered trying so hard not to lose the postcards you gave me to make sure I could get to it, and then I think I lost it and kind of forgot about it until I saw you at MiniCon. And then got excited about it again. So
yeah.
But and then I looked online. It looks like you have a couple forms of the graphic novel, which I remembered you were telling me you have like a noir edition, maybe.
Right. There's the Kickstarter edition, which we used the leftover Kickstarter funds to do a private small printing, and so that book is kind of a pocket size. And then because our publisher fell through, we put out some different options on Amazon, because their minimum pricing are so ridiculous. So there's the large format edition, which is like magazine size, and then there's the noir edition, and then we split the book up into like 3 issues just in case people wanted to try it out, So
right. A nice thing on there too. I don't know if you knew this, but I think if you have the Kindle app, you can read the first like 5 pages for free.
Yeah, I did see that. I think that was an option that I could select. So yeah, I was happy.
Yeah.
I love how the first page has a little nudity in it, though. So I love how that's the first thing you see when you do that.
There's a lady's
preview. Yeah. But I guess I can't stop that. That was the first page. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Oh well. Uh, and then I also noticed when I was looking you up on Amazon, do you have a novelization of it as well, or is that something different?
No, yeah, it is a novelization. It was I was actually working on that beforehand, kept on hitting, walls with that, so
Yeah.
I put that aside, and then when the graphic novel came out, I went back and finished it. So
Hmm.
that released maybe a couple weeks ago, actually,
Oh
so that's
wow.
brand new.
Okay.
Mhm.
Um, Interesting. I know I started writing a story as a novel and ran into some, I guess, walls myself. I know with me, I got really excited about key action scenes, and I had a hard
Right.
time kind of filling in the gaps, and so then I kind
hmm
of slowed down. And then kind of just stopped writing. So I guess then, I mean, is that something similar that happened to you? Was the visualization in the comic that helped you kind of push through, or?
Yeah, I guess. Well, I'd written my first novel in high school, and I
Mhm.
published it about 10 years ago. And I just, I was a younger writer, and it came out just horribly. It was poorly edited and everything.
Yeah.
And so it was just, and I'd lost my kind of will. So I had been working on this for a few years and just never really committed to it. And when someone challenged me to do the graphic novel, that just kind of breathed new life into it. So,
Hmm.
um, yeah, so I was just, I think I'm definitely a better writer. I've done a few things since then, but never published a full
Hmm.
book before. And so it was fun to get back and really challenge myself to rewrite that.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Um, and then yeah. Okay. So, uh, w- I think I saw online too that you're gonna go back and rewrite that first book.
Yeah, yeah. I actually wrote it. It was the third year anniversary for my high school sweetheart, right?
Uh.
So it had like her name and my name, and then I went into the military and I self-published it, but didn't do very well with the editing and everything, and it was
Mm.
all in like first person and went all over the place, and so I've hated that book for years, and now that I've gotten this done and I'm kind of back into the writing world, then yeah, I'd love to go back and rewrite it. So
Yeah.
that's what I'm
Yeah.
doing.
Interesting. Well, I guess let's get back to maybe the fierce is fading. Am I
Yeah,
saying that right? It's the fierce is fading.
the fierce are fading,
Are
plural.
fading.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. So this is about. Actually, I didn't have a chance to read the whole thing. I'll just say that. I'm sorry.
No,
Uh,
that's fine.
but it's about a CIA agent or
FBI agent, FBI.
FBI. My bad.
Yeah,
So, and what is maybe as much as you're willing to divulge to get people to want to read it?
sure, sure. Well, it starts off in Seattle. FBI agent Riley Harper. She's a kind of a floater agent, and she's assigned there to help the local police hunt down a serial killer. And she's partnered up with a young officer, and in the course of apprehending the serial killer, stuff goes crazy, and he gets blown up, and everybody thinks he's dead, but she has a reason to believe that he's not, and that he's actually being held hostage somewhere. And
Hmm.
the more she digs into it, the more the kind of sci-fi elements open up, and she finds evidence that suggests there's like a shadow organization out there that's holding him hostage.
Okay, and that's holding the her partner hostage.
The partner, yeah,
Okay,
the officer. Hmm
interesting. Does she have a penchant for coffee and pie?
No, no.
Okay.
Um, yeah.
Sorry, just as you were talking about it, I'm just like, I really feel like watching Twin Peaks now.
I love Twin Peaks and X
Yeah.
Files and all that old stuff. It's good stuff.
Yeah, it definitely had an X Files feel to it, and I think the art helped a lot with that. And so you got your artist from overseas? No.
Yeah, yeah. No, you're right. I can't draw to save my life, so
Yeah.
I found a couple pages on Facebook that connects authors with artists,
Oh, nice.
and she's a 19-year-old girl over in Italy, and she did a lot of like one page commission work for people, and
Mm-hmm.
I sent her a couple pages of the script and asked her if she could do like consistent face work and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I loved her style, and I told her what we could likely raise off Kickstarter, and so we raised $6,000 to pay her for
Nice.
200 pages. So that's, I mean, that's it's a nice sum, but it's actually not a lot. And
Mm-hmm.
and so I got really lucky with her, and yeah, I think it turned out great.
Yeah, it did. For sure. That's what was? Did she speak English or do you speak Italian?
No, she spoke English pretty well,
That's
yeah,
good.
or at least
Uh
enough to understand each other. Yeah,
huh.
that helped.
Yeah, yeah. So that's interesting. So I assume you probably haven't actually met her in person.
No, and that's the craziness of it. I
Oh.
mean, she's young. She doesn't necessarily have the money to travel, so
Mm-hmm.
maybe one day. But Facebook profile pic is about as much as I get.
Interesting. Okay.
Hmm.
And so I guess how was that collaborative process? I mean, I assume you would just write a script and send her the pages and just kind of have a back and forth, maybe.
Right, right, yeah. And she certainly wasn't the first attempt at this. She was about
Oh.
the fifth,
Oh
and it
wow.
was. I mean, I had a couple people locally
Mm-hmm.
here in Nebraska that I'd worked with, and it fell through. And I had tried to hire some other people through other ways, and it fell through. So I was surprised with her being on the other side of the world. It was the most easiest collaboration
Oh.
of the of them all. And yeah, I told her about the book. She really wanted it to have a strong female character, and that was already the direction I was going with. And
Mm-hmm.
so she was really on board with it, and we did fun things like she wanted me to cast people as the roles, and I would cast certain people, and she would just freak out about the random people that I picked, and so it worked. It worked really well. Yeah,
So
I
like,
I typed up the whole script and gave it to her, and then she'd check in like once every couple of weeks and go about that way.
oh, nice, interesting.
Hmm.
So about the casting thing, like, so do you mean you like famous actors? You just kind of told her like this is who I think would be good for this character, or what do you mean by that?
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah. I didn't tell her to necessarily draw this person, but
right.
I had thought about certain people, um, like oh gosh, I'm trying to there's the guy that just won an Emmy for Mr. Robot, the lead actor,
Hmm.
Rami something. He was the main guy that I was thinking of, Rami Malek. So I
Okay.
thought of him for like the main male character, and then I thought of there was a main girl that I thought for like the well, there's two girls that I thought for the women characters, and
Mm-hmm.
yeah, she just loved the fact that we both really liked the same kind of actors and actresses,
Okay.
and it just clicked. Yeah.
Yeah, that probably helps a lot. I've not seen Mr. Robot. Is that good? It looks really good from what I've seen.
It is, as long as you can like concentrate, because
That's
it's
what I've
it's
heard. Yeah.
it's deep. Yeah.
Oh, Christian Slater's
Um.
in it as Mr.
Yeah.
Robot.
Right. Yeah. It was weird because he's not the main thing, and I
Yeah.
used to love Christian Slater, and
Yeah.
I was happy that he kind of came back.
I think that's
Yeah.
proof that we're not millennials.
There you go.
Because you
Right.
know who Christian Slater is.
Uh-huh.
Because I just remember him
Oh,
from Robin Hood.
Robin Hood, Broken Arrow. I loved
Yeah,
him
I
in,
forgot
and
he was
now
in
that's
it.
heralded as like a terrible film. And, yeah. Ruby Rose was the character for um, the
Oh, okay.
main assassin chick. So
Okay.
she Ilaria, my artist, just loves Ruby Rose, and that sealed the deal. So yeah.
Nice. Well, that's really cool that
Mhm.
that worked out. That's interesting too. Like, what was the reasons for the previous artists not working out? Just style wise or personality wise?
Um, well, the first two that were local,
Mm-hmm.
I met them through friends, and they just weren't committed to it. I was willing to pay them. We had agreed on the price, and they just couldn't do it, or
Hmm.
they realized that it was way too big of a project for them.
Interesting.
Um, and the other ones were mostly style.
Okay.
There's a lot of horror elements in here, and
Mm-hmm.
not I mean not a lot, but more sci-fi. But
Mm-hmm.
some artists wanted to really sexualize it, and
Mm.
that wasn't really the way I was going. And so it was nice to find Ilaria, because she wasn't she wasn't trying to over sexualize the women. She was trying to write, or illustrate strong
Yeah.
characters, and so we
Yeah.
clicked on that level definitely.
Yeah, and from the bit that I read, I for sure, I don't know if I necessarily picked up on that, but now that you say it, I mean, I could see, especially like you said in that first scene, there's like a bit of nudity.
Hmm.
And I honestly didn't think that, I mean, I feel like I noticed it just because it's the first page, I guess, and there's a but after saying that, like, I do feel like it was kind of, it felt natural, like that's just how that scene would be, kind of thing, and not
Sure.
like it didn't feel forced, and I don't know, I just have to say, basically, I can appreciate that style about going about it, and I appreciate, I guess, that
Hmm.
that you went the extra mile to find that artist, I guess. Um, so that's really cool. Interesting.
Yeah, it was actually hard. There's a after I don't know if the preview images show it, but there's a scene in the beginning where there's a girl being held hostage by the serial killer,
Mm-hmm.
and that's pretty much the extent. I would write in the script, girl being tied up to a chair, and
Mm-hmm.
some artists would just put her in like lingerie and stuff like that, and I'm like, well,
Wow.
really, you're really taking this a little far. That's not exactly what I said, and so. I realized with the 5 pages that I gave them, they already went to that level. I really didn't need to be fighting them throughout the whole book like that. So
Yeah, yeah. I think yeah, from what I saw, the girl tied up, um yeah, it just looks like a girl tied up to a chair. So,
yeah, yeah. Ilaria has a
which is
more
nice.
natural
Mhm.
approach. So
Mhm. Yeah, that's cool. It's interesting that, I mean, that, yeah, I guess you have to do that kind of extra work and research to find uh artists. I mean, and it makes sense, I guess. I just I don't think I necessarily thought about that whole process. And I know that, I think a lot of, from what I've seen, a lot of writers will, I guess, seek out specific artists before starting books. So, like, you said you were pushed to do the graphic novel after
Mhm.
starting this as a regular novel. So then you just started the process of finding an illustrator through Facebook groups and stuff. So that's what you said?
Yeah, yeah. I
Okay.
mean, I'd gone through some other sites that kind
Mm-hmm.
of allowed that as well, and I was finding all of these guys that weren't amateurs, but they were
Yeah.
as far as the publishing world, and they wanted the moon as far as payment, and I was like, hey, man, this it's not realistic. Let's be real
Yeah,
here.
yeah. So,
So,
had you been
yeah.
to mini Comic Cons before that, or was this book kind of what started you going to those?
I mean, and not to sell. I'm a huge
Right.
comic fan.
Okay.
All these shelves behind me have, comics, and I've got these cabinets over here that are full of Batman comics, and
Okay.
uh, so yeah, that was the thing. My friends knew that I was hitting a wall, and they
Mm-hmm.
knew that I enjoyed comics, and they're like, "Hey, man, why don't you try to, tear it down a bit and build it this
Right.
way, and then maybe you'll get back into it."
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Cool. So your favorite character is Batman. You just alluded
Yeah,
to. Interesting.
yeah, that was good.
Huh. Is that a Batman helmet behind you, or it looks red? I can't tell.
Oh, yeah, it was a Red Hood, yeah, Red Hood variation that I did for
Ah,
a Comic Con. Yeah,
that's cool.
famous Batman villain. Yeah,
The Red Hood.
yeah.
I have that copy. I have that comic. Don't worry. I actually prefer the Red Hood over Batman, honestly. Uh, I don't know. I think I kind of don't care for the whole debate between whether or not Batman should kill, and then people getting upset about the movies. Um, and so it's just
Uh,
like, why not just skip the whole debate and say it's okay? I guess. I mean, yeah, I don't know.
yeah, that
Uh,
no, that was the best part of the Red Hood storyline, him bringing
mhm.
that question to life. So yeah, I
Yeah.
appreciated that.
Well, and
Hmm.
that's the whole. I mean, it's a thick. I mean, under the Red Hood, I guess is what I'm talking about, and like, I
Yes.
mean, and that's
Yep.
the whole comic is just him repeatedly asking
Mhm.
Batman, like, why won't you kill the Joker?
Right. Right.
And it,
Great. Great question.
yeah, and there's a good read for that.
Hmm.
So I mean, so I guess I mean bringing up Batman and comics and stuff. Would you say that your writing is influenced by those things, or I mean, and you said you're in the military. Is it influenced any by that?
A little bit, yeah.
Okay.
But you know, it's the writing itself is more influenced by X-Files and stuff like that. I
Okay.
mean, I never thought I would be a comic book writer. That wasn't what I sought out to do.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, while I do appreciate Batman, a lot of the other graphic novels I own aren't superhero stuff. You know,
Mm-hmm.
they're like those independent graphic novels, those mysteries and stuff like that.
Right.
I love mystery and really deep dark sci-fi, so that's my biggest influence.
Okay. Do you have any plans on writing any more of these deep dark mysteries?
Yeah. So the Fierce Are Fading, as far as the graphic novel is concerned, it's a one and done story.
Okay.
But the novel reads a little different,
Hmm.
and I do have plans for a sequel to the novel, and then kind of an in-universe prequel to it as well. So
Okay.
plan to jump into that once I finish rewriting my first book.
Right. So, is there any reason you're jumping back into just novels rather than continuing a graphic novel? Just money
Well,
or?
just I mean, that's a big thing. I mean,
Right.
Ilaria, she's booked up for the next 2 years
Oh
because of this
wow.
book, and I'm so
Nice.
happy for her.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then just I mean, yeah, it's expensive to find an artist and
Right.
and pay them. I mean, I got lucky with her, but I
Mm-hmm.
don't think she would charge the same now that she's got her name on something worldwide
Yeah.
and if I was an artist myself, which if I could ever get reincarnated, that's what I would do. But uh, if I was an artist myself, I'd definitely push forward to that. But
Mm-hmm.
I'm not, and raising the money on Kickstarter was definitely a challenge, but certainly not something I'd like to jump back into. That was just a nightmare, and
Right.
and so maybe down the road, if the books do well and I can convince somebody to adapt one of them
Mm-hmm.
and bring it back to graphic novel. But I'm happy that we at least have this one. It's definitely fun. It's 200 pages. It's a
Wow.
mammoth
Yeah.
of a book, and so I'm happy with that for now.
Good. Cool.
Oh,
I'm always glad to hear that people are continuing writing. Especially and glad that it was such a success for you. That's awesome. Uh, are you planning on continuing to just take this book to cons and then bring the novels along with you, or?
yeah, that's a plan.
Okay.
I mean, we were originally with a publisher. They were a Canadian publisher, and
Mm-hmm.
and we got crazy screwed over by them, and so now it's definitely reliant on me getting it out there, and I'm more
Mm-hmm.
than willing to do that. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Hmm. I guess yeah. Talking about the publisher, then. I don't think you necessarily need to name names. I guess. Like,
Sure,
was the
sure.
problem that unless you really wanted to smear them in the mud? No, but like, was the problem that they like went bankrupt, or did like your contract
They
just not pan out?
No, they did. They
Okay.
went bankrupt, although they haven't officially told anybody yet. And they're a Canadian company that I had met up at C2E2
Okay.
Comic Con,
Hmm.
and I'd really appreciated some of the books that they had. They had a huge bookshelf of books already in their 2 years of existence,
Mm-hmm.
and I picked up one and I loved it, and I said, hey, if you're willing to publish this, what do you think of this story? And I pitched it to them, and they're the ones that pushed me to do the graphic novel.
Oh wow. Okay.
So I did. They use Kickstarter to fund all the initial printing of their
Mm-hmm.
projects. So we raised the money on Kickstarter. Larry and I finished the book, and once we got it to them, all of a sudden they were hush hush, and then
Hmm.
they deleted their Facebook for their company, and then their individual Facebooks, and
Oh
and
wow.
uh, they weren't responding to emails for months,
Huh.
and our Kickstarter deadline had come up, and they had no books to send out to people.
Mm-hmm.
And the way Kickstarter is set up now, it protects the pledgers. So if you think you're being conned, all you got to do is report it,
Hmm.
and you'll get a refund. And because the money came to me, I would be responsible for that. And of course,
Okay.
I used the money to pay the artist, so I didn't have anything left over.
Right.
So,
Huh.
and we had sent like 2 grand to them for production, and they pretty much just took it.
Oh wow.
And it was a 3.5 month war to get them to return that and drop us from contract. And
Oh okay.
but
So
yeah.
that's nice that you were able to get out of the contract then. Did did
hmm
did you sign over any rights, I guess, or was it still? Did you still own
No,
it?
thank God. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I own it, and yeah, I mean it was a really sweet deal, and
Hmm.
they did about 5 successful Kickstarters after mine,
Oh weird.
including a pretty big Canadian actor from sci-fi. I can't remember his name, but he had a book, and
Hmm.
none of those books have come out yet.
Oh okay.
Um, a friend of mine did a book through them as well, and their book hasn't been printed, and I
Hmm.
think they're just bankrupt and kind of lying to people. So I got really lucky to get out of that.
Yeah, no doubt. Wow. I mean, I feel like I've heard a couple of bad stories about contracts, but it's usually like where you don't own the rights and you can't publish it. But
Yeah.
I'm glad that you made it through and you were able to still get it published. That's nice. That's good to hear.
Yeah, I had to go after him, that's for
Uh
certain.
huh.
I found contact info for his parents, and this guy's like in his 40s, so his parents are kind of up there.
Uh huh.
And I waited till the last moment, and then I reached out to him, and the next day I got my money back and a release
Wow.
from contract. So
That's that's awesome. You
I
got to
had
go
to
to his parents.
play a little dirty there, but yeah,
That's awesome.
yeah,
I
yeah.
enjoy that.
So going to Comic Cons, that's really what I have to do now, to get the word out. So I'm
Yeah,
happy to do it.
yeah. I guess from that then, uh, I would assume that you make most of your sales at cons.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I have books online, but they're
Hmm.
different versions.
Okay.
Amazon has different trim sizes, and
Oh, okay.
so I try to bring those trim sizes plus the Kickstarter size to Comic Cons, and I sell them for cheaper than they are online.
Right.
You know, because that's the thing. When I go to Comic Cons, I want to bring something home,
Hmm.
and so I try to definitely cater to the people that come out there and give them a good deal and
Hmm.
whatnot. So yeah, that's where I make most of my money to go back and buy more books.
Yeah. Cool. Trying to think what else. So, how many cons do you generally go to? You're out in Omaha. And I'm
Right.
like I'm actually not familiar with any cons west of Des Moines, so I focus
Yeah,
more going north and south. But
sure. Well, I mean, the graphic novel, it just printed in
okay.
in June, so
Oh
I've
wow.
I've
Okay.
only just now started, selling it. So I went to O Comic Con, which is
Hmm.
here in Omaha. It's the second year. It's pretty successful. It's a kind of a smaller to medium sized Comic Con. Does pretty
Yeah.
well.
I actually
Well,
I think I had a friend who went out there this year, and it sounded like it was pretty good.
yeah. I mean, well, it is smaller. It's like 6 to 12,000, but I'm happy
Oh
with
okay.
that. It's a hometown. You got to support it.
Hmm. That's
So then,
surprising.
yeah, yeah.
I would
Well,
expect Omaha to have a bigger crowd than that because you guys have such a big indie music scene. I would assume
we
that it'd
do.
spill over a little bit into comics, but I guess not.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's growing, but
Mm.
it was only in its second year and it was kind of poorly advertised. So
Yeah.
I was happy for the turnout we got. I was pretty
Yeah.
surprised actually. So
Is that a 1 day or a 2 day?
it's a 3 day.
Oh
It's a three
wow.
day.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Going big.
Yeah. So I've been to that.
Okay.
Kansas City Comic Con is a
Hmm.
fun one to go
I've
to.
heard that's a
So
fantastic one as well.
yeah, I guess there's two down there now. There's the
Hmm.
WonderCon, and that's more media based. That's where they bring out more of the TV stars and stuff. And
Yeah.
then Kansas City Comic Con is more creator based, and they do have some TV stars there, but it's mostly books and comics. And so that's the one I
Hmm.
went to.
Cool.
Um, yeah, and then we've got Midwest Con coming up in December, or not
November.
December, November.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're going to New York Comic Con in October.
Yeah, I
Really
saw
excited
that.
about that.
That's awesome, man. I've heard that
Yeah.
that's actually bigger than San Diego. I've heard.
Technically, yeah. Well, in-house it is.
Okay.
Yeah, in-house San Diego fits 130,000, but they have so many sister sites, all around it that
Yeah.
combined it's a lot more. So
Okay.
in-house New York is 170.
Oh wow. Okay.
and they're starting the sister sites. They have Madison Square Garden this year
Oh, nice.
for all their panels. So yeah, they're growing really
Wow.
fast. They're definitely the two biggest competitors.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's cool. That's really cool that you. So you're just gonna have a table out there.
Yeah, we'll have a small press booth,
Cool.
booth 1160. Man, that was hard to get, but it was my little white whale, so I was happy to get it.
Oh, no doubt. Is that expensive to get into, or like what was so
Uh,
what's so hard about getting into New York?
well, because everybody wants to be there,
Right.
So the guy that makes the call, we applied back in February, and then I kind of kept on touching base with him throughout the year. And he told me, he just for the small press booths, he had hundreds of applications.
Right.
Some Comic Cons will let authors be a part of the artist alley,
Mm-hmm.
but not New York. You have to be an artist. So I
Oh,
didn't
wow.
qualify for that.
Okay.
So small press was the next option, and he said just hundreds of applications for that. So
Hmm.
the reason we got picked, according to him, was because we had original content and we had books. I guess he was overwhelmed with like fan art stuff, which
Hmm.
you still need to have a talent to do, but he
Yeah.
wanted more books and hard content. So yeah.
Nice. Well, that's good information to know too for other people, I guess, trying to get in there. Uh,
Sure.
so then I mean, since I guess you are technically self-published now, do you have a publishing company or do you just have it under your own name?
Yeah, I registered an entity here in Nebraska.
Okay.
It's called Fierce Literature, just
Okay.
because Fierce or Fading was their first book.
Mm-hmm.
So that was one of the things. The first book that I published 10 years ago, I canceled the deal with that publishing house, and so now I can re-release it under my own imprint. And so,
Nice. So
yeah,
so
Fierce,
you plan on
Fierce
just
Literature.
doing all future stuff through that. That's kind of cool.
Yes. Hmm. Yeah.
Uh, so you can put CEO on your business cards now.
There you go. Yeah.
Well, that's cool. Are there any other cons that you go to?
Well, we're trying to go to C2E2 next year.
Mhm.
A few of my friends and I go there every year, and so it'll
Yeah,
be fun to have a table there.
right.
But that one's really expanding too. It's ran by the same people that run New York Comic Con,
Oh, wow.
and so it's like tripled in size in the last
Hmm.
4 or 5 years.
Wow.
So their prices almost mirror New York's prices now as
Hmm.
far as booths, just because it's so well attended. So
Yeah.
um,
Do you know how big that one
yeah.
gets?
That one, I think last year it got like 98,000, something like that.
Okay. It's
So
pretty up there, yeah.
98 is pretty high. Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Uh,
mean, I remember going its second year, and it had just I mean, it wasn't a tiny space, but it was 1/3 of the space it is now. So I was pretty impressed with going there last year and seeing how much it's increased.
yeah, yeah. Wow. So how long have you been going to cons, I guess? Like
Well,
just as
I
an
got out of the
attendee.
military. Yeah, I got out of the military in 2009 and came home, and C2E2 was the closest, the closest one that I could afford, and
Hmm.
so after that, I was like, man, this is this is great. So I started trying to bring my friends, and then I got married and I
Hmm.
introduced my wife to it, and now it's just kind of been, if it's a weekend we can get free and do a little road trip, then it's worth going.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Nice. I know I have not been to C2E2 yet. I somehow tricked my wife into going to San Diego. Um,
Oh wow.
and so it's kind of funny. It's funny that I went big initially, uh,
Hmm.
and now it's like I really want to go to C2E2, and so it's kind of funny, I guess. Um,
Yeah. A little easier to get into than San Diego, that's for certain.
yeah, I was half surprised that I was even able to get tickets to San Diego. But I guess I mean it was lucky that it's just a lottery basically, and I was willing
Right.
to sit on the computer. I think I just sit there. I sat on a like watching TV and the browser on my computer open for like 2 hours. And then it
Hmm.
finally popped up and said, "Your turn to buy tickets." And Saturday was sold out, so I got to go Friday and Sunday. And uh,
Nice.
then we ended up just making it a whole like a week-long trip, and we went canoeing, no, kayaking
Mm-hmm.
in the ocean, and uh, went to the zoo. San Diego Zoo is amazing too, by the way.
Yes, I've heard good things. Yeah.
But it's I always recommend just to make a whole week out of it, and go to the con on the weekend and do some other stuff on the rest of the time. But I mean, that's a trip in
That's a
itself.
bucket list for us, that's for certain.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But
Actually, New York Comic Con is almost to that level
mhm.
of having to do the lottery.
Oh yeah.
They did something new this year was a fan verification thing.
Huh.
You had to fill out a whole fan verification and then submit it, and then you would get a link on opening day to get tickets, and you were limited to so many tickets.
Mhm.
And it was basically to prevent scalpers and
Right.
companies buying a crap ton of tickets and selling them on their own. So I
Mhm.
like that, but it's definitely leaning towards eventually getting that lottery just because they sold out so quickly.
Yeah. It's funny how popular these
Actually,
things have come.
yeah, the full weekend tickets were sold out in 30 minutes.
Oh,
So that's
jeez.
crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Huh. My dog is really barky today. Oh well. Well, cool. Trying to think. So your new projects are your books. We covered that.
Yep.
Um,
Yep.
covered your cons that you're going to. I mean, is there anything else going on that you'd like to talk about?
Um, not really. I mean, yeah, like I have the next 5 books planned out,
Okay.
and this has definitely lit a fire under me. I mean, it's been 10 years since my last book, and that's certainly not the
Oh
case
wow.
anymore.
Yeah.
I've jumped right back into it. My wife got me a quirky writer, which is like a Bluetooth typewriter, like modern typewriter, and I love it.
That's
So
awesome.
it's gotten me, yeah, it's actually it's right here. It's gotten me back into the will to write, and this thing's just gorgeous. I mean, I love it. You hook it up to like your computer and everything,
That's
and it's
awesome.
great. So yeah, so I'm back in it full fledged, and like I said, I've got a prequel and a sequel to Fiercer Fading coming out. I've
Mhm.
got my first book, Guarding Heaven's Gates, which is it's a fantasy novel.
Hmm.
That's coming out, and then a couple other stories that I've been keeping in my head for the last few years that I'd like to really kind of explore more. So
Yeah, I know how that
uh,
goes.
yeah, I've got new life in it now, so I'm excited to really explore that.
Uh huh. Uh huh. Awesome.
Yeah.
I guess I mean, not talking about writing. What is I'm as a person who's trying to get into writing, and I'm personally kind of struggling to find a good method. I think the way I think in dialogue, and so then it's hard for me, like I said, to kind of get that in between stuff going. So like, what's
Yeah.
your method for getting a story out? Like, do you just kind of dump it out and then edit it, or?
Yeah, I mean, I totally get what you're saying. My first book, it definitely revolved around action scenes, like you
Mm-hmm.
mentioned before. I had key scenes, and it was about putting in the filler, and you just get bogged down with the filler, and you lose your motivation to write it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I go back and forth. I like to story map, but only themes. You
Mm-hmm.
know, there's some people that profess you need to like write down chapter and then points of each chapter and stuff like that. And I think it's that you'll drown yourself in preparing that much, and then you won't
Mm-hmm.
actually get to the writing of it. So
Yeah.
if I do any story mapping, I like to maybe go by chapters, but at least go by themes,
Mm-hmm.
and then think about that, and try to start with that, and then I go back and say, okay, how can I make this chapter better? Like I try to end each chapter almost on a cliffhanger. So
Yeah.
how can I end this better and whatnot?
Hmm.
And I also try to put more how can I develop my characters the best way. I used to
Mm.
just write where there'd be your main character and maybe a side main character, but the rest of them would just be bland and you get their motivations, but you wouldn't really care about them. And
Yeah.
so I try not to do it too much because then I'll just, like I said, I'll get lost in the preparation. But
Hmm.
I try to flesh it out as much as possible, and then when I'm not writing, I'm just kind of, daydreaming about it until I can get to it. And
Right.
I mean, I get the I'm a huge procrastinator with everything,
Yeah.
so I hate the internet because I'll be quote unquote researching things, and then 4 hours will go by and I haven't written a sentence. So
Yeah.
um, it's definitely a matter of self discipline and
Hmm.
just trying to find the rhythm, and then once you get into it, you can't stop. So it's just,
Hmm.
you just got to keep attacking it until you find your rhythm. So yeah.
Yeah. So then when you come up with an idea for a story, uh, do you typically? I mean, I assume you come up with. Well, I shouldn't assume. I guess. Do you come up with characters first, or do you come up with like a plot first, and then bring the characters in? I know with me, like in the story that's in my head, I think one of the first things I thought about was the ending, and then trying to just figure out how to get to that.
hmm
Um, so like, I guess how do you start with a story? Like, does an idea just pop in your head and you just build from there?
Yeah, I mean, I think of the two stories that I have written, I did look them at different ways. I had the plot for one story and I had the characters for the other story. Fierce or
Hmm.
Fading is actually it was going to be three different books,
Okay.
or not three different books, but it started with three different plot lines that all evolved around the different characters. And I was like, this would be more tight if it was one story, and so
Hmm.
kind of I had to keep on talking to myself about which character was the strongest and which should lead the book.
Hmm.
And then when I picked the female FBI agent, she definitely seemed to tie the other ones together, and so then that formed the plot. And
Hmm.
um, yeah, so I definitely with Fierce or Fading, I started with the characters, I formed the plot around them, and then I tried to elaborate that plot more by putting in, maybe subplots, but
Hmm.
that didn't distract from the book, that enriched the whole story.
Hmm.
So, yeah,
Hmm.
I mean, it's definitely something you got to keep in. You got to keep it in your head. You can't just think about it when you're writing it. You got to think
Yeah.
about it before you're going to bed and when you're driving to the movies and when you're reading another book. I constantly had to make sure. I mean, like I love the X Files. I didn't want this to be the X Files. It's a
Right.
female FBI agent with a sci-fi story. I had to make sure it wasn't the X Files,
For sure. Yeah. Yeah.
So just keeping it in your head and mulling it over. And I mean, this story has changed maybe 5 or 6 times before I actually started writing it, and
Uh
and that's a curse as well because you keep on changing it, you'll never actually write it.
That's
So,
that's the problem I'm at right now. Because I
mm,
know like the story, one of the stories in my head, it started off as like there's like an empire and there's like a fall, or there's a coup and the prince like
mhm,
runs away and then he gets captured by like these slave traders and junk happens, and then somehow now it's turned into three characters rather than one prince, and they're actually from like a parallel universe, and they
yeah,
come
yeah,
into like this more medieval kind of land, kind of like Narnia, I suppose, but
hmm
with more Lord of the Rings feel to it,
hmm
sort of, but like a lot more sci-fi at the same time. Uh,
yeah,
Basically ninjas and robots, and then there's a kingdom.
throwing it all in there.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, maybe too much, and that's part of the problem. And so then I keep coming up with new ideas, and
uh-huh,
so I know. So I think that's how I get excited about stories. I think about the characters, and then because I think when I think about plot, I keep switching in and out characters. Like this could be better
sure.
with this character instead of that character, and I noticed I was running into that issue, and so then I ended up with three characters instead of one, like I said.
hmm
Um, but the one thing that I've noticed is all my main characters tend to have like facial scarring to the point where they have to wear a mask. So I don't know what that's about.
Nice, nice.
I'm sure there's something
Uh,
psychological going on there, but
well, I commend you for that though, because I mean, sometimes people get lost in the world building of their
yeah.
book, that their characters are just one dimensional, and they're just throwaway. And so
Mm-hmm.
if you can really flesh out your characters and then build a world around it,
Mm-hmm.
I think that'll be a richer book, because you're not following the world, you're following the character. And so
Right.
um, yeah, I think that's a good way to do it, is really flesh out your characters and then figure out how the world fits around the character, and not necessarily how the character fits around the world.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
I guess. And on that too, do you have any major tips? I guess that we haven't, or you haven't mentioned, for people like me that are aspiring writers, or aspiring either getting into comics or just writing a novel.
Yeah, I guess just don't overpsych yourself out.
Yeah.
Like you don't, if you were lucky to take some writing classes in college, then awesome. If you weren't, it doesn't mean you can't write a book.
Yeah.
It's a matter of uh, of just there's so much to be said about planning a book, but you can only plan it so much. You got to actually write it,
Mm-hmm.
and then if you can get that first draft, then you can go into to editing
Mm-hmm.
and rewriting it, rethinking about it. And I'm telling you, man, I mean, I knew there were going to be other books for this Fiercer Fading. I knew there was going to be a prequel and a sequel,
Mm-hmm.
but I could not, for the life of me, I couldn't map them out.
Hmm.
And then once I finished writing this, it was just like the other two just came to me smoothly.
Right.
I was at Kansas City Comic Con, and in the slow periods, I just had a notebook and I was writing it just
Mm-hmm.
chapter by chapter. And I'm like, here it is. This is the book. Why couldn't I think of this a year ago? And
Yeah.
so yeah, I think if you can force yourself to really dive into it, once you get past that first draft, it'll come to you a lot easier. But
Mm-hmm.
until then, you just if you psych yourself out too much, you'll never get it done.
Right.
And and the other thing is, in just like I was saying, I didn't want my book to be the X-Files,
Right.
but if you try too hard to not make it something else,
Mm-hmm.
you won't focus on your own work. So
Right.
I think it's smart to just write your story, to really get it down. Then once you got that first draft, then go over and critique it and say, does this sound like something else? Am I taking it from this? Even if I'm not purposely, could it be seen like I'm ripping off this thing?
Mm-hmm.
And being able to critique yourself that way, you're able to go back and then rewrite it or add things, take away things to really, even it out.
Mm-hmm.
But then on top of that, one thing I definitely learned from the first book: don't try to proofread it yourself. When you have this book done, you're going to be looking over these pages. You could look over the same page 10 times and miss half of the edits.
Mm-hmm.
And it costs, but you can find somebody out there that's affordable. I found a great editor that helped me both with proofreading it and story points.
Hmm.
And at first I was like, do I really need to pay another person when I'm already putting all this time and money into the book myself? And
Yeah.
I was so glad I did, man. Definitely refined the book
Yeah.
to a more professional stance. So
Right.
take it as far as you can take it, and then find somebody to help you out.
Yeah, and I think that thing about an editor too, because I know that that's a big temptation just to like forego that and not do
Hmm.
it, but it kind of just popped in my head. Like I know I'm a web developer, and whenever I go to like a restaurant's website and it's just like clearly a really terrible WordPress theme or something like that, like just go that extra mile to hire like at least a designer to do your WordPress theme.
Hmm.
Or I mean, it's the same thing too as like buying an Apple phone and then just paying like $5 on a case or something that isn't really going to help.
Right.
So
Now, there are people that don't want to do editors because they don't want people saying that they should change the book.
yeah.
And I get it. It's your book, it's your baby. You know what the story is. You don't want somebody telling you to change it,
Mm-hmm.
and that's fine. But you can at least have somebody read it and listen to their comments. Like
Yeah.
the story elements that my author or my editor told me weren't necessarily to change the plot, but they were to refine it to a
Mm-hmm.
point where it made more sense. Because
Yeah.
you're the author. you've been thinking of this in your head. It makes sense to you.
Yeah.
You got to make sure it makes sense to the reader who hasn't been daydreaming about this book for the last 2 years, you know?
Yeah.
So it's definitely worth the expense. And if you really look out there, you can find somebody in your price range,
Mm-hmm.
and it's worth it. Yeah, for sure.
Cool.
Hmm. So that's my only advice, really. I mean, for
That's good
starters.
advice. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Is there anything else? Otherwise, I'll see you in
uh,
November.
you know what? I'll say one more thing.
Okay.
The other thing people find daunting is that there's so many books out there,
Mm.
and publishers are a lot harder to get your book in front of now because you have to hire an agent, you have to pay the agent to read your book, and then they have to,
Mm-hmm.
there's hardly any publishers that accept submissions nowadays, except for some of the like risque romance books and whatnot. Um, but I will say, compared to 10 years ago when I found a self-publishing house that I paid like $900 to print my book.
Mm-hmm.
CreateSpace exists now, which is Amazon's publishing company, and
Yeah.
holy crap, it is the easiest thing to use. And they have their minimum pricing that they work with you on, and for the graphic novel, it was hard because it's color.
Mm-hmm.
But for a regular book, man, it's the easiest tool to use, and then suddenly your book is available worldwide. I mean, you
Wow.
can't, you know, you
Mm-hmm.
can't you can't fight that. So if you really have a book out there and you don't want to go through the year or 2 or 3 to find an agent and
Yeah.
find a publisher, put it out on CreateSpace, and then you control it. You own the rights. You control what the cover looks like, how many versions of it is, and
Hmm.
it's cheap for you to buy your own copies and go sell them yourself. And I mean, I
Nice.
was just, and it's free. CreateSpace is free. They
Mm-hmm.
they take they take their cut of the book, but it's
Yeah.
it's based off production, and a black and white text book is, you can print for $2 to $3, so it's
Nice.
it's not crazy. And
Yeah.
yeah, so that's the tool that once I realized that was something that I could use, man, it's made everything a lot simpler. So
um.
I suddenly want to write all these more books and put them out there. So.
Yeah. Yeah. Speaking of CreateSpace, then I've heard that there's possible issues with that since it's tied to Amazon, with getting
Mhm.
your book into like other bookstores that might see Amazon as competition. Have you found any
um,
issue with that, or?
I guess that's true to a point. I
Okay.
mean, yeah. How many franchise bookstores really exist anymore, though? What is There's
That's a
Barnes
good
and
point.
Noble, and that's about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so yeah, if you're trying to get into Barnes and Noble, you're probably going to be competing with Stephen King and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But as far as your local bookstores and
Mm-hmm.
and things that aren't franchised to that size, there are elements of CreateSpace that you can give a code
Mm-hmm.
to a bookstore and be like, hey, you can buy it at the author price instead of at
Okay.
the Amazon price, and
Nice.
so they can buy a $16 book for $4, and then they
Okay.
can still make their profit. So that
Hmm.
if they're willing to support local authors,
Mm-hmm.
then at least they can do it that way. So no,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't
Yeah.
think it.
Okay.
it I've heard things about infringing authors, and so I was cautious about going in there, but
Uh.
no, I don't think there's crazy restrictions or anything, and I think it's a great tool for getting out there. And
Right.
and there are some people that started on CreateSpace and then got noticed by publishers and then
Right.
went the publisher route. So
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think it is, especially if you're starting out, it's a matter of getting your work out there, and then
Right.
hopefully you get picked up by somebody, and if not, then you have books that still exist worldwide,
Yeah.
and you can push it that way.
Right.
So
Right. Okay.
yeah.
Uh. Trying to think if I guess I have any more questions. I don't think I do.
Right.
All right. Well, thank you very much. It was a good conversation. I'm glad I ran into you at Icon.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm looking forward to seeing you again at MidwestCon. That should be a good one this year.
Yeah. Yeah. It was. It was a lot bigger last year than it had been previously, right? I mean,
Yes. Yeah.
I'd only attended, so I guess I didn't know what the feel from. I mean, well, was last year your first year with a booth, I guess.
It was my first year, but I was assisting another booth had been there previous, and
Okay.
they said that it had grown, and
Mm-hmm.
it's not. I think it's going to be in a different hall this year,
Oh, it is.
but it's supposed to be bigger, and
Oh, I hadn't heard that. Nice.
Yeah, but I was impressed. I mean, for
Mm-hmm.
what it was. I was really impressed. I think
Mm-hmm.
they work hard and
Yeah.
they want to give a good experience for the full family. And
Mm-hmm.
I know they're expanding on panels this year. I
Nice.
actually might
Nice.
do a panel myself. I might do a panel on crowdfunding and how you can do your book that way if that's where you want to go.
Mm-hmm.
So
Cool.
talking to the guy that runs it about that. And so yeah, I'm excited. I can't wait to go back. It should be fun.
Yeah. Well, I will see you then, and thank you very much for coming on.
Yeah, thank you. Oh, one more thing.
Oh,
JoshuaDHowell.com.
oh,
That's my website.
crap, man! I can't believe I forgot to do that. I always like to ask, how can we make you internet famous?
No, that's fine. The Fiercer Fading has a Facebook page, so if you just search Facebook for the Fiercer Fading, otherwise JoshuaDHowell.com. I've got my Twitter linked in there and all the prospective covers for upcoming books and everything. So yeah, Facebook, Twitter, and the website. That's how I'm reaching my people. So
Great.
yeah, come find me.
Yeah. Thanks, man.
All right, thank you.